But it's not such a mean world. At least that's what my reporting has taught me. But now it's your turn. Here to take your questions or criticisms are John Locke from the Crime Prevention Research Center, Patrice Lee from the Independent Women's Forum, and film critic Christian Toto. First question from Facebook. I guess this is for you, John. Nick Trika asks, a common counter-argument to pro-gun people is Australia put strict gun laws in place in 1996. Since then, they've had a low crime rate, no mass shootings. What's your response?
I think it shows the opposite of what he thinks it shows. There was a big gun buyback, reduced guns by about a third, but then since then people have gone out and bought guns, and gun ownership rates about back to where it was before. What that would predict is a sudden drop and then an increase in crimes and firearm suicides, and that's not the pattern. In fact, if anything, it's done the opposite of what they would claim.
To the audience, who's first here? Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody have a comment? What does happen when guns are banned by an entire country?
Right.
Over history, what has happened?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, every single time guns, either all guns or all handguns have been banned, murder rates go up. It's because the law-abiding, good citizens are the ones who obey the law, turn in their guns, and not the criminals. And just as criminals can bring in illegal drugs, they can bring in the guns that they use to fight those battles. Go ahead.
This question is for Patrice. You and John showed these terrible, terrible examples of school policy run amok, and I just wanted to know, has there been any substantive action to correct those policies?
It's about common sense, but there's another case, interestingly, where a young woman, chapstick was banned for in her school, strangely, and she actually...
It's an over-the-counter medicine, they say.
But what she did is she collected 30,000 signatures and is turning them into her school system to say, you know what, actually this ban does not make any sense, and for me, who has a chronic chapped lip problem, you know, I deserve to be protected just as much. So it's as much about the individuals and the parents standing up, and then, you know, laws maybe, but when we stand up and we unite together, that causes a lot of change.
You have talked about movies and efforts to ban guns, but what about video games? They are continually demonized in the media, and yet any research is conflicted at best. Most of it
Christian,
is.
you have a take?
Yeah, I mean, video games are more intensive because you're taking on the identity of the shooter in many cases. So it's not just you watching James Bond saving the day, it's you shooting at different
Wait a
people.
second. Video game use, violent video game use is way up, and crime is down. In Japan, you play even more of these horrible games. Very little crime.
The research study with movies and TV says that it's a factor. They can't have a cause and effect relationship. They say it's one of many factors. Of course, the child's upbringing, the parents, there are lots of different things that come into play. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you see cases where there was someone who was a mass murderer. You look at his past, and there's a whole bunch of violent video games in there. So, can't blame
He
him.
drank milk, too.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe it was the
That's how
milk.
complicated this is.
Correlation is not causation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is, you showed clips of commercials where there was accidents in the home with children being shot with guns. I have 3 small children, 2 of which are girls. I've already bought them rifles, and I will teach them to fire their rifle and to defend themselves no matter what anybody says. So why aren't there more commercials depicting success stories where the child is home by themselves and shoots the intruder and the intruder flees?
I actually read a book that dealt with those issues called The Bias Against Guns, but what I found when I was writing it is that you'd find dramatic cases of 8, 9, 10-year-olds who had used guns to save lives of relatives. But the media wouldn't cover those very much. You'd see maybe 1 200-word story in the back of a newspaper. And so I called up the reporters, the crime reporters. I say, here you have one story of a taxi cab driver who's been killed. That got picked up by 25 newspapers. But yet this other story of a 9-year-old who saved his grandmother's life only was a small story in the back of your newspaper. And the reason that they gave me was they were worried, and they thought others were worried, that if they put guns in a positive light with regard to kids, then that would make it so that more kids would have access to guns, and then they were afraid about accidental deaths that would be occurring, that they'd be responsible.
Thank you, John, Patrice, Christian. Next, why it's a better world now than ever before. Yeah.